Oh, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Swingman podcast. It's podcast number 110. As ever, I'm your host, Jordan Ledger, joined as I am all the time by Louis Halpin and Lewis Howard. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump straight into this. The banner is saying big on Brooklyn, and it's right now because, I won't say that they're a surprise package, the Brooklyn Nets, but they are they're going beyond anyone's expectations at the start of the season. From what they all had with Kevin Durant's issues, Kyrie's issues, James Harden's moving about and everything from last year. The Nets have been impressive, haven't they?
Yeah, I think it's a case of, as you say, there's been so many off the court things with them. No one's ever denied the talent, and they've got the ability to be one of the best teams in the East. But it starts seeming now that they're all starting to put it together, and they're reaping the rewards of those results at the moment, sitting fourth in the West. The East, sorry.
Yeah, I think it might be 8 of their last 9 that they've won or something like that. They've gone through a couple streaks so far this season. It started off horrifically, those first couple of games. Obviously some really big off the court stuff of Kyrie kind of dominating. I'd say just like the NBA headlines in general, those first couple of weeks, even though, we had the Lakers who have been bad and then the Warriors, but that kind of trumped all. And it's since Steve Nash got fired, I feel like that kind of stuff has sort of quietened down a little bit. We haven't had a weird Kyrie thing in a couple of weeks. I'm not ruling it out for the rest of the season.
Are you saying it's overdue now? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it kind of is actually. He's due one of them, isn't he? Like a sort of 1/4 of a season, basically. But yeah, they seem to have just sort of like quietened the noise around the team and just put it all out on the court, which means they've improved quite a bit. I will say their schedule has been quite favourable over the last couple, which is, I think, attributes to their good record and their good record over the last 10, definitely. But you can't ever rule them out as contenders, really, even though I wouldn't consider them as such because they have Kevin Durant, which is more important than having Kyrie and Ben Simmons because he's top 3. I think you can put him in any order, but he's definitely at least top 3 players in the NBA and one you would want in the playoffs anyway. So it's interesting to see how they progress. Definitely, I'll be keeping a close eye on it.
I think the coupled ability of those two now seeming Durant is just sort of I've been quite impressed with how Kevin Durant had everything of the trade rumors at the start and it hasn't been elongated and dragged out and he's not brought it up a lot. It's sort of he's not been like prime vintage Kevin Durant, but he's been very, very good this year. Kyrie, again, like you said, he's settling in. It's a bit worrying that we all expect something to come from soon. And then Ben Simmons, apart from the little injury that he had the other week, he's been very good in terms of him coming back in and slowly working his way back into the team. And they've got nice little pieces around in terms of Joe Harris, Seth Curry, Nick Claxton's been quite good this year. TJ Warren's just come back. But yeah, I think the Brooklyn Nets, they're far expected. I'm trying to think of the word for it here. It's
exceeded.
Not exceeded. There we go. That's it. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Exceeded people's expectations, but they're still not a sure thing because everyone is just expecting sort of if they'd hit like 4 losses in a row, you'd then expect it to hit like they'd start stumbling and there'd be issues that would creep up from them.
Yeah, there's also a big health issue with them because you mentioned Ben Simmons being injured a couple of weeks ago. He seems to sort of had the intermittent injuries every couple or so weeks, and then people thought he was faking it last season, but I can assure you he wasn't because it was a back injury, and obviously there was the first half of the season which was a bit dodgy, but he seems to be really struggling with that at the minute. And of course not Nick Claxton, Royce O'Neal's just got back as well, and I think at any point, like last year, they were pretty good until Kevin Durant got injured. And then they just absolutely nosedived. I think they were like 10 above 500 before he got injured. And then they barely scratched into the playoffs. So it's all reliant upon that. And I do prefer other teams in the Eastern Conference. I'm not sure if there's 2 other teams I can think of off the top of my head anyway. I'm not sure what you think about that.
The Bucks and the Celtics are the 2 I think that stand clear of the others at the moment. Although obviously you got some other teams like you give a shout out to the Cavs because they have been very good this year. But for me, the standalone teams are the Celtics and the Bucks. And I also think there's still some issues with that Nets roster looking at its inside presence. And when I look at a team like the Bucks, I think they should be able to take advantage of something like that.
Yeah, agreement. I think the Celtics may be in danger of being a bit not underrated because everyone's given them their flowers so far, rightly so. but they've just been amazing offensively this season. I think they might be 9th or 10th in defensive rating so far this season, which is good. But we expect the Celtics to be, first
Your
or
Celtics,
second.
your lockdown teams is what
Exactly.
you think you associate with
So,
the Boston Celtics.
so when they turn that on, I think it's getting Rob Williams back. Basically, that's a big part of it, isn't it? Because he was so impressive to their defensive transformation last season. I think they can take another step up. So
yeah, I'd expect a defensive drop off when you put Blake Griffin at the starting 5 as opposed to it. So I think you can cut them some slack from that one there. There was some vintage Blake Griffin that I saw the other night, which was
he's doing quite well. I think they quite like him over there as well.
I think he's a good presence in a locker room anyway, Blake Griffin. I think he's a very likable guy across the NBA. It seems
stand-up comedian.
Exactly. The thing with the Celtics is I haven't seen both. I know it's hard to do it in that sense, but I don't know if I see it as a negative or a positive that if Jason Tatum's having an off night, Jaylen Brown pops off, and if Jaylen Brown's having an off night, Jason Tatum seems to pop off. And I can't work out if I think that that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because I think in these sort of times in the regular season, it's nice to have an alternating guy that can sort of carry. Like just for the Sixers sense, it seems that Embiid is the main guy that will go and really point score. James Harden isn't that guy as much we've seen on the Sixers. He's done it a couple of times, but he's more of he's just going to play, make and run the offense, and it'll always go to Embiid or he'll kick it out to the corners to Tobias Harris and something. But with the Celtics, it seems that like if one of them's having a bad night, the other one is fine to go and put 35 up or something like that. So, that's why they're top of the conference at the moment for it. But yeah, we've gone off on a tangent from Brooklyn there, but.
Yeah, the last thing I'd say about that is the thing that gives me more encouragement with the Celtics is I think everyone talked about, when is Tatum going to announce himself as one of the best players in the league? And I think this season's where you're starting to see he's in consistent MVP form so far, and it's been 30 games. So if he can carry that on, then that is sort of that next level that maybe Lou was talking about that the Celtics could reach, where they become an offensive juggernaut as well as being the defensive juggernaut they've been for the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, Tatum is 30 points so far this season. Jaylen Brown, like you mentioned, they kind of alternate, but I think as a duo, there's not many better in the league. I can't really think of many. I guess it's not like the complementary type of duo you'd expect, like a playmaker, finisher type.
They're like two wings that are both two. They're a very strange combo for it. Yeah.
If we're being fair, it's what we expected Kawhi and Paul George to be when they signed them a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
that is what they have right now. Jaylen Brown's 26 points per game, Jason Tatum's 30, and they're both defensive lockdown guys. So they're scary. They are a scary team. Obviously, you got the big looming giant, which is the Bucks. Giannis, Middleton back now as well. So. I can see those two clashing in the playoffs and that kind of being the decider. I think everyone else is quite.
I think the Drew Holiday thing will be the big thing in that series because Drew Holiday's been really good. Granted, he's had a bit more usage because Chris Middleton's not been about, but I think Drew Holiday could definitely be that sort of the changing factor between the two. Yeah, he can be the swing. If Drew Holiday goes really well, and it's weird to think in a series where you're like Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jaylen Brown, Chris Middleton, that Drew Holiday will be the piece there, but. I don't know. That's very, very far away. There's a lot that can change from it. We'll stick with the Eastern Conference, though. We'll move over. We'll talk about a team that's sitting in 7th at the moment. Not had a bad season, not had a great season. The Atlanta Hawks. And there's a bit of ruckus going about, some jiggery pokery in the Atlanta Hawks camp at the moment with Trae Young. I don't know the full inside and outs of this because I knew Louis was touching on it briefly before we hit that recall button. But
yeah,
it's essentially that Trae Young's he's a bit disgruntled in Atlanta, is what we'll say.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like there's not been a history of this as well, because I believe the previous coach I think it's Lloyd Pierce. Lloyd Pierce was their previous coach. And I think Trae may have influenced his dismissal at some stage. And they brought in Nate McMillan to great success. Got to the Eastern Conference Finals with him. They sort of found their identity then. But apparently he had a bit of a scuffle, or not a scuffle, that implies that they fought, but I think a war of words maybe.
Some strong words were exchanged.
Yeah, maybe the type of direction the team is taking at this moment in time, and they're not doing great, because I know that you said they're the 7th seed, but with that home run trade they made in the summer, getting DeJounte Murray in, I think you would expect them to be maybe in the Cavs bracket at the very least. I don't think we expected title contention, but pushing some of the bigger teams at the very least. And apparently there's a bit of a war of words. Trae sat out the next game because of it, which they said he was injured. He didn't turn up to the game, which then that got leaked, and he got sort of quizzed by a reporter, a bit grilling actually for some beat reporters about why he didn't turn up to the game when John Collins is there, who was injured as well, but with a big boot on his leg. Why isn't Trae there as well? But yeah, we've seen this before. I think a couple of years ago they said John and Collins and Trae had a bit of a, sort of difference of opinion on how the team should be run.
Well, I mean, it's just anyone else using the ball apart from Trae Young for more than 5 minutes a game.
I mean, I don't like teams that are built like that when someone is just dominating the ball so much, especially when you've got a guy like DeJounte Murray who can take that responsibility as well sometimes. I'm not sure what you two think of like a team built like that anyway.
My stance on it will be that if it's sort of one mega star, like when you look, the only ones that I can really think of, I know we had the James Harden one in the Rockets at some stage, and then you also had the Rockets and Harden was great in the regular season, but every time it got to the playoffs, it never worked, which was the shortfall of how the majority of these teams go. The one outlier you can think of is probably LeBron at the Cavs, but even then he had Kyrie Irving. So it was still not as... they're not ball-centric players. LeBron wasn't the only one that used the ball the entire time for it. They never really work, but for lower teams down in the ladders, it can be a way to propel them up, but then they get stuck in a sort of trance of doing it the same time.
I'd say Luka at the Mavs is probably a good one when you're talking about usage rate. I think the thing you have to consider is how good is the player that you're giving all of the time of the ball to. And I think everyone is pretty happy in saying Luka's a top 5 player in the league at the moment. Whether you think how the Mavs are constructed at the moment, whether they'll be able to do anything, I don't know. But I think most people would be happy with Luka having the usage he does. So maybe it's just a matter of, do you think that player, if you give him that kind of control, will push you over the line? And maybe in the case of Trae, it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, I think with the Hawks, you'll end up seeing... I can't see John Collins standing about in the Hawks. There's been too much smoke without fire now. I think a trade is going to get done for him. Don't think it's the end of the world if they lose him, especially if they get someone that can sort of help change the system or benefit this Trae Young / somewhat DeJounte Murray style. I think AJ Griffin's really good as the rookie that's come in and done well for it. But in terms of the whole other sense of the team, it just is a bit... It's not great, but not good. That's pretty much the issue I see with them.
I think the issue is as Louis was saying before, when they signed DeJounte Murray, you wanted to see the Hawks make that leap into the, maybe not like Bucks Celtics category, but towards the upper echelons of the Eastern Conference. And they're around about where they were last season. And if you make a blockbuster move like they did, and you repeat your form from the previous season, that's obviously cause for concern.
Yeah, I really like the team overall as well. I like Bogdanovic. I like DeJounte Murray. I mean, John Collins doesn't... Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's going to last much longer. But Okonkwo, DeAndre Hunter, I like all those players. And I think in contrast to Luka Doncic, where, there is a usage issue there. And I think you can only go so far, even with him being a top 5 guy. But Luka Doncic doesn't really have great players around him. And I do think that the Hawks have built quite well around Trae. My major concern is I don't think he is good enough to be the best guy on the championship team. I think they got quite lucky when they got to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of years ago, and they sort of hammered home that, or sort of in their minds thought this guy can take us to the promised land. But really, they came up against the Knicks, which, I mean, we've seen in the years since maybe weren't a very good team. Maybe riding off a bit of sort of rejuvenated spirit in that city. I'm not sure. And then the Sixers were just an absolute a mess. We've kind of lamented over that, so we don't need to go into that very much. And they did do a decent shout against the Bucks, who did win the championship. But I don't think, because the way he plays, he kind of has to be your best player because he's so ball dominant. And I just don't think he's that good. Like, he's just not that good a player to lead to a championship. I think that can be perceived as an insult, but there's only so many players that can actually do that. It seems really verified.
This potentially isn't a fair comment to make. I mean, I have no idea in terms of the surroundings of the team, but I think when you think about potentially the mindsets of the players, when they got to the conference finals, and in Trae Young said, he's like, I was the guy that brought them there. It's now my responsibility to get back there, win a chip, and do all of that. In his head now, maybe he's trying to do too much all the time because of this, and he's not that he's not trusting teammates, but he's still in that mindset of I'm the alpha, I'm the guy, I'm the number one, and not playing around in the way of which you've seen teams that have got sort of that model, but they trust their guys a bit more. Is all.
Let's do a little exercise. Would you take? This one's easy. Would you take Trae Young or Luka Doncic?
Oh, you take Luka Doncic.
Would you trade Trae Young or Ja Morant?
Oh,
I'd take Trae Young. I still think.
I think I'd take Ja.
I think I would take Ja as well. So, who others are there in that sort of age bracket? SGA. Would you rather have him or SGA?
Yeah, but that's unfair because SGA is having the season of his career at the moment.
But, I mean, we're just projecting.
But the expectations are different as well on SGA. Like the thing is, SGA is going to get his knees cut out soon because they're doing too well, the Thunder, for what the plan is. So I can see him getting they're suddenly going to start benching him for games and resting him. But I still think I'd take Trae. I think he just needs to change. It's easier said than done, but just change the styles up, and that might be as a negative. That could be why he's so good and everything, because his usage rate has to be that high. But we've never seen him change it. That's the only thing I'd say. But he'll probably. I mean, the way that this works in this league is it's 99% player power. He's the most powerful player in that franchise. He'll probably end up getting his way in terms of making a trade and getting a new coach, and that seems to sort of be it.
I mean, they do have, as we said with the DeJounte Murray, they have the facilities to maybe try and change things up a little bit and give him maybe more of the ball and try a bit less and see how that works. But I'm not sure, considering the way Trae's most effective, that there is more of a push from what the ceiling of this team could be. Maybe you'll have to look to some of the players coming off the bench or their second unit to really push them up a little bit further.
I think that there is a very strong future in terms of some of the players that they've got. I know you mentioned it before with Okongwu. I said it with AJ Griffin. Okongwu looked great every time he's played against the Bucks, and he's played Giannis. He's looked really good in that sort of role. So they do have good young players that they can build around. They've just got to be very careful with what they start to trade away and what they get back for them. For example, the John Collins one. That'd be a big trade for them in terms of when it goes down. And I do expect that to happen before February. So
I don't think the team's bad. I don't know if there's many moves to make apart. Like Lewis says, I think it is just a style of play that they need to change, and how easy that is to change. Well, clearly
a mid-season change of that is very. It's
we saw the
rare to
Celtics
happen.
do it last year.
Yeah,
and
that's the only one I can think of in like the most few in the recent years. The Celtics, they didn't stink, but they weren't great, and then suddenly they just switched, and they were unbelievable. No, they weren't terrible. They weren't terrible, but it's that. I mean, they were worse than what this Hawks team.
Yeah, they were. They were under 500, I think, by December last year.
The Hawks are just about, aren't they? Aren't they 14-14?
Yeah, I suppose we are in December as well. I think I remember them being worse. Yeah,
the season is actually flying. That we're like a third of the way through, which is nuts to me. But anyway, well, I mean, I'm done talking Atlanta there. It's sort of after so much. Nathan probably would talk more about Trae Young. That's his guy, but. We've poo-pooed him enough there. We'll leave Trae Young alone for now. We'll move on to the headlines of the most weak, I'd say, in terms of the NBA I've seen since their first kerfuffle of the Grand Theft Alvarado 2 is what we'll move on to now. The Phoenix Suns are doing an absolutely stellar job of trying to go for the number one hated team in the NBA, is what I will say. It's just there was the whole thing came about from the Zion windmill dunk at the end of the game, and the Suns then kicking off and being like, "That's disrespectful. You don't do that. You walk the ball out. You just sportsmanship and all that yada yada." And then when they did the replay fixture, I don't think it was a back-to-back nights. I think was there a night in between? Is what I want to say. There was a night in between. I think both were televised games in America, and then there was footage of CP3 going past Alvarado. And not even like fully elbowing him. It was like a little jog by and then a slow elbow raised. Which he knows what he's doing and then trying to get away with it. And to be honest, it's quite surprising that it wasn't caught in today's NBA because they catch everything, it seems. But it's just, and then afterwards in the game, you got CP3 going, I don't know what his problem is with me and all of this yada yada. But it's just, I don't know. I don't know what you two think about this in terms of the Suns Pelicans matchup. It's it's definitely it's your M25 derby in the Prem is what I'd say for it.
It's bit of handbags, really. I think mainly.
Yeah.
It slightly reminds me of the Grizzlies Warriors rivalry, where I think they see the Suns as they beat them in the playoffs last year, and that's where it kind of stems from. They see them as the team to overcome, and I think that's why there's a bit of needle between the both of them.
It's good to see though. I really like regular season games when they're like that, because normally they can just be a bit of a not dull, but there's sometimes they can be games where they just don't even care for them. And we'll touch up on a few players that don't even seem to care about the regular season anymore later on. But it's nice to see that unless it's your sort of big franchises going at each other, that there is still competitive rivalry in the regular season. For I wouldn't say games that don't matter, because you've got like the Pelicans, for example, they've been doing really, really well under Zion's leadership in terms of him staying healthy, keeping fit. And I don't want to it's not going down that tangent of badgering Zion, but it is unfortunately what he had that stigma of recently in the past year or so. There was too much put on his sort of weight, his physicality, his health, and everything like that. And it's shown that at the minute, he is starting to live up to the hype that was coming from him when he was drafted into the league.
I mean, yeah, he still had that 27 point per game season early on, and you just have to watch the games and watch him play. The man is literally unguardable in the paint, and no one can deal with his explosiveness and his size. Even though he is smaller for a power forward, there's just so much of him and he's so explosive that you just can't stop him from getting to the rim. And the thing I'd say about seeing this in regular season games, the one thing you always like to see is storylines being created throughout the season for the postseason, because it is very likely both of these teams are going to make the postseason. And if they end up matching up, then it just adds a bit more excitement to the whole thing. And that is usually all you want to see from the NBA and from the playoffs, and it just elevates everything to a new level.
Yeah, I think there's going to come a time where it's a bit too early now, but we need to talk a bit more seriously about the Pelicans, because they have all the tools to be a bit of I'd liken it to sort of like the Dallas Mavericks dark horse run last year, because I think they're first in the Western Conference right now.
Yeah.
Their defensive rating is really, really good. They're third in the league in defensive rating, which is not something you'd attribute to them previously. Fifth in this offensive rating, so they've got great balance, which is a key to any great team in the league. Zion is obviously, he can get a bucket when he wants to because he's just so dominant. Brandon Ingram as well. He's got that perimeter game, so they can mix it up a little bit. And then you got all these other supporting pieces that are just like they fit together and they're really good players. They don't have a bad player really on their roster. So
CJ
I think we just have to see how they develop.
Off of them. CJ's taking a real weight off of some of their players offensively as well, which I think helps massively.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, would you say they're legitimate sort of title contenders, the Pelicans?
I'd have to wait and see.
Maybe not title, but dark horse for the Western Conference potentially. Yeah,
I think, I would agree in terms of the fact of at the moment, I don't think it's sustainable from what I've seen in terms of games, because I think they are just a bit too reliant on Zion. Granted, Brandon Ingram has had his injury doubts, and that's what's seen him flourish a bit more. So it can all change. But I would like to see them sort of make a trade around. I think they can get something for Larry Nance Jr. in the season. I think a few other pieces. I'm just looking at their roster now, and I don't really know where else there is particular value. Dyson Daniels has been starting over Alvarado. I can see that maybe changing. Devontae Graham, they've got still. And then it's like Jackson Hayes and Hernan Gomez. And I don't know where there is particular value. I'm not sure what they've got in terms of picks that they can trade with. I suspect they've still got quite a few. They'll have quite a few that are still in the bank for them. Now, I was trying to think of what they gave up for CJ. But I think that they've got the scope and the ability, and it's just if the right thing comes along, I'd like to see them move for it. And I think that they're in a position now where they're not win now, definitely, but if they can get a nice other piece to add to Zion, to Ingram, and to CJ, that they're looking pretty strong. I'd like to see like a good center that pairs with Zion. I think
that's what I was going to say. Miles Turner maybe for you got Valanciunas there, who I don't mind, but.
He's a good big, but he doesn't work with Zion, is what I'd say.
No, it's not
as optimal as it could be.
I do think Valanciunas has played quite well for the Pelicans, though. And, talking about the win now, as you said,
Oh, has he gone? Has he gone there?
You're right. It isn't winning. I've faltered. Am I back? Am I back?
You're back. Yeah, we lost you for a moment there.
Okay. I was just saying that the other teams at the top of the Western Conference have been, obviously it's early on, so you can't faltered, but they look like they're minus probably the Grizzlies. They've been quite inconsistent start off the season, so this could be an opportunity for the Pelicans to make some waves.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I think. So the West is wide open. That's what I would say if anyone's trying to debate whether they are real contenders or not. That the Warriors ain't great, and the Clippers obviously. Well, I mean, we might get to those later. But yeah, all the big hitters you would necessarily say, apart from the Grizzlies, haven't been.
No, the Nuggets they've been good, but they've not been what they were of last year. Definitely not. So,
and I don't trust the Suns either.
The West is there for the taking, but again, even though we're a third of the way through, it still feels like we're like early days. Still, it's a bit of a you sort of after this time you know what teams are, but there's a lot of time for teams to turn it around and also mess it up. So, but we'll switch it up. We'll go from top of a conference to the absolute bottom of a conference. We'll talk about the Pistons. Crocked Cade. There we go. That's a tongue teaser there. He was injured at the start of the season, picked up that injury, then started shooting around a bit, and they thought, potentially there's ways of rehab and so on and so forth. But the decision was taken to have season-ending surgery. I believe it's on his shins. I can't necessarily remember. I don't think it's both shins, as I should say plural. But I think the injury will keep him out for the end of the season, potentially hampering into the start of the new year. Sometimes this happens with these big injuries, but the Pistons are now in just full on. How many games can we lose? And I understand it. I respect it. I can see why, especially this year. And I don't know if you've heard of him. There's this guy in the draft that's going to come out called Wembanyama, and he looks quite good. Just a little bit average. But the Pistons have definitely got some pieces some teams that are looking to make that trade and that extra piece that they've got, and now is the shop window time for them because they're going to go competitive losses. How many points can Marvin Bagley III put up in one night and look like an unbelievable stretch five of what they've been playing as? And the same thing with they've got Bojan Bogdanovic still. Jalen Duren's looked quite good, and even Kevin Knox is looking all right for the Pistons every now and then.
Yeah. Bogdanovic is probably the prime shop window guy, you would say. I think they did extend him, which was weird, but maybe that was to preserve his value. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they might have to wait a bit to trade him. But he'd be on top of quite a few teams' lists. Lakers would love someone like Bogdanovic. So, it's a shame about Cade. I really like watching him play. Really, I think for me anyway, ran it close for Rookie of the Year last year because he was really, I felt, impacting games because more so than like Scotty Barnes or Evan Mobley were because he was that entire team. Playmaking ability, shooting ability is great. And I would like to have seen more of him and Ivy together and see how that chemistry developed. But yeah, they're right in that sweepstakes now. And I guess, you mentioned obviously the main attraction of the draft. It's not a bad compensation if you were to follow like fourth, second or third either. Scoot Henderson believes in the G League's quite a good player as well. Doesn't really match because they've already got two guards, I guess. But, there's always trade down, trade up possibilities, but it's a shame that there's another sort of lost season for Detroit. I want to see them on the up again eventually. Pretty big history there in the NBA, so hopefully he can get back on track next season and hopefully they can become a better team eventually.
Howard, have you got anything to say on the Pistons or just pretty much the same echoing stuff as me and Louis?
Yeah, essentially echoing the same sentiments, to be honest.
I think, I'm just looking at this roster, really. Maybe Sadiq Bey. I think I've seen some talk about him.
He's all right. Yeah.
And he's quite young as well. So there's some pieces. It just depends on what the Pistons are going to do now. So, but their mindset of that season will be now, do you know what? We'll have Cade Cunningham back for next year and potentially a generational talent that is also going to come about. And we've spoken about them. We'll talk about the Clippers to some extent, but I mainly want to focus on Kawhi Leonard because he made some pretty shocking. I don't really know if it is shocking because I think it's what everyone really thought about Kawhi, but it's just more of that it's been said out loud now. When he was asked about a playoff game, about a regular season game, he was like, "I just don't want to be here. I'm focusing really on playoff basketball." And Kawhi is very, very well known across the league for having his injury doubts. Does this ever come across as a surprise to either of you two?
Yeah. No, I think it's always seemed very self-directed from Kawhi, the amount of games he's played. I don't think the team would necessarily organise. I don't think they're organising it for him, if that makes sense. It feels like almost not really part of his contract. I'm not saying that, but it's like a sort of like gentleman's agreement that like I'm only playing this many games. And obviously this year has been, I guess, a bit different because he hasn't come back from injury pretty well at all. I know he hit the game winner against Charlotte a couple of weeks ago, which was nice to see. But we're gonna run into those same old issues again. And we've talked about it before, where the team doesn't play enough games together. Maybe their record isn't good enough, so they don't get home court advantage, which I think is quite important. They don't have the team chemistry. So if that's his choice, that's his choice. I think there was a couple of years ago when I was pretty high on the Kawhi is the best player in the NBA. But when he won Finals MVP, I think that's a fair argument to make. But since then, it's been pretty disappointing because this guy could have been, I think, one of the real all-time greats in terms of what he'd done already and what he could have done. But some of it is not his fault, obviously. He can't help being injured. But some of it, I feel like, is self-inflicted, if that makes sense.
I obviously this is in hindsight and everything can be easy in hindsight, but I really wish he'd have stayed in Toronto just to see what that team could have done, because that team it was really well rounded. It didn't really have many issues in terms of anything. I know he still had some injury issues up there, but they rested him well, but they played him to an extent of that when it then came into the playoffs, it wasn't throwing in this massive all-star that would completely change how you play. And he also complemented and had complementary features to your Van Vliets, to your Siakams and stuff like that. But I know it's easy to talk in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, they were good next year as well without him. I think they pushed Boston hard because it's the bubble, so they pushed them hard. I think in the semis, Eastern Conference semis, Kyle Lowry was really good. He took I think that team probably had another championship in them, if I'm being fair, more so than the. But he always wanted to go back to LA. That was the whole thing. Yeah. It seems like he has kind of prioritized maybe the lifestyle, I guess, the off-court stuff maybe more than he has prioritized on-court stuff recently. So that's fair enough. He can do what he wants. But I'd just like to have seen him take that next step up, because I think when we done our top 20, I voted for him in the top 20, and I think I still would, but can't put him any higher, can you? You can't put him any higher. True. I just want to see him get back to his best, because he was, when we last saw him at his best, he was like 30, 40 points in the playoffs against would have been the Jazz. Did he play in that series or not? At all. I think he played the first couple and then got injured.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah.
It's with Kawhi again. I just see the Clippers end up doing the same thing of where they'll play him. He might get 25 more games this year, maybe 30. And then when it comes to playoff time, the team will be so sort of not discombobulated, but it will be so sort of chopped up and changed that I can't see that when they have these big playoff games, and it's a very worn out saying, but playoff basketball is completely different to regular season one. I think it'll be too much of a change and a shift along sort of just how the team will play fluidity. So yeah, it's one of these things. I'd love to be proven wrong, because I really do. I like Paul George and I like Kawhi Leonard, so I'd like to see him do well, but I can't. I wouldn't bet on it.
Truth be told, I have not paid any attention to the Clippers this year because of that.
I primarily have, but that's because of So Rare and Luke Kennard. But that's pretty much it from me and Norman Powell and guys like that.
He's doing the business, Luke Kennard.
Luke, I bought him and then he got injured, as in true typical fashion and stuff like this. But when he comes in, he hits some knockdown threes, gets a couple of defensive steals.
Heat check Luke Kennard, isn't it?
Yeah, Norman Powell's the sort of the guy that you'd want from there. But there's some few value pieces in the Clippers, but that's a So Rare thing for it. But I think that I still don't think he's nowhere near sort of finished or washed or any of those rubbish words that you can use on Twitter and you see on Twitter. But it is sort of, you're now worried because he's 31. He's not old. He's 31, and if these are your issues at this stage, when he gets to his sort of 34, 35s, where are we seeing Kawhi Leonard?
He's not going for the LeBron, is he?
I don't think he'll be in LeBron years.
It's just the same issues with chemistry and injuries that the Clippers have had for a while now, which just kind of disheartens you a bit when it comes to how they'll perform later on in the year.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find his contract to see how long he actually has left, because they extended him, didn't they, as well?
When he got injured, they extended him. In fairness, I think might be wrong.
It's a big
Because it would have been coming up the same types of years as LeBron and AD, because it was obviously all in one off season, wasn't it? Which is a pretty crazy off season considering. But yeah,
So when he signed a 4-year deal in 21-22. So when he in 2024-25, when he's 33, his contract is 48.7 million.
Shit.
That's quite a lot for someone that 33 might play 30 games a season.
Slightly worrying. The Clippers are really cursed, aren't they? I'm not one to believe in fate or that type of thing, or curses, like team curses. Some people believe in that. I just think it's just sort of like matter of circumstance, really. But they have had some pretty horrific stuff. I mean, it was just talk about Kawhi PG now. You just have to go back to Blake Griffin. Chris Paul used to get injured all the time.
Yeah.
They obviously had that horrific owner. They was just the worst man ever. It's a real. I was
just thinking as well. Paul George's contract is until 2024-25. Well, he has a player option in 2024, but I mean he's going to take that. But Paul George is also on 48.7 million in that, and he's 34 at that stage. I think Paul George will be still a viably great player in the NBA when he's 34. I don't think he'll break down that much as to the extent of what we've seen Kawhi.
Yeah, you can't doubt Ballmer's ability to put down the cash.
No, he's not fruitful in that sense, is he? So
no,
I think that the Clippers they'll dive into luxury tax and stuff like that if they need to.
Yeah. Easy.
I wouldn't worry about the Clippers for it, but yeah, it's for what
Warriors,
they've given
Warriors
up.
Are happy
for
to
what they gave up for the two. It's not what they'd want to be expecting with sort of 3 years left on their deals.
No, it's okay to be in the luxury tax if you are, I guess, a viable shot of winning the title, which I guess you could argue they do. I wouldn't put them in the top 5.
I wouldn't have top 5, top 6. No,
probably less than that anyway. Now that I'm thinking about it, but yeah, it's when you're like who's a good example? Probably like Atlanta actually, or Minnesota, who may I'm not sure may dip into luxury tax, something like that, and they're just like no, and they're just never going to win the title. So yeah,
no, totally. That's pretty much all I wanted to have a little chat with today, lads. Is there anything else that you sort of wanted to bring up?
No, that's all.
Yeah, nothing from me.
No, I think cool. We'll end it there then. We'll have not a short but brief, but definitely not a long podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Make sure you follow us on all of our socials at Swingman Pod. We're on YouTube as well at Swingman Pod. A little bit before mentioned, if you like SoRare stuff, primarily me. I'll be tweeting a lot, doing some more content on that, especially in the new year to come. And yeah, check out our website at www.swingmanpod.com. And we'll catch you in the next podcast. We might have another one up before Christmas. If not, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And then we'll see you in the new year. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.